All right, good afternoon, guys. This is Nitha Ramachandra from the NR Hour Sports Show. This is episode 717, alongside with my co-host Alyssa Charleston, and we're joined by a really special guest, Amy Trask. She's a sports executive, author, author, lawyer, and she's also a former CEO of the Raiders. So I'm really looking forward to this interview. First of all, Amy, how are you and your family doing so far during this tough situation?
I am well. My loved ones are well. Thank you for asking. Thank you for having me on. And wow, did you say 717?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's quite a few. And your work ethic is apparent from all of your tweets.
Thank you.
Yes, he's persistent. He's
Yeah.
definitely got that gene for sure. We're lucky to get guests like you on, and we so appreciate it. So I really want to start off just with your personality and how much that has impacted where you are now, because I've seen and read and heard that you had labeled as like the behavior problem in kindergarten, but it seems like that's really helped you in your career and not taking no for an answer, and kind of lifting off and creating a path for many women in sports. How does your personality kind of show up in what you do now?
I think there may be a connection. I've never given it a tremendous amount of thought, but you have identified some facts. Look, I was the kid in kindergarten who was labeled a behavior problem, and that label stuck with me all the way through 12th grade. Some people will tell you that that label is still appropriate. Uh, you know, I've always been a contrarian, and the best advice I ever received in my life was advice my mom gave me starting when I was a very little girl. She told me, "To thine own self be true." And as moms can do, she told me that over and over and over again. And as kids can do, I rolled my eyes whenever she did. But the fact is, it is the best advice I've ever received. And the mistakes I've made, the regrets I have, are when I tried to be something I'm not or someone I'm not. So, was I a behavior problem? Absolutely. If I were my parents, would I have probably tried to send me away to school? I probably would have. And it was something that was discussed, but I think it's also served me well in some regards.
Interesting. So for you, Amy, I know you've done a lot of stuff in your career, but when did you start realizing when you were growing up, throughout your life, that you wanted to be in the sports industry? And also, obviously, you're a lawyer, so but mainly in the sports industry. When did you get interested in that? And who was that one role model that you had growing up in your life?
I'll answer that in reverse order. There was no one role model. I've never had a single role model or a particular mentor. I've learned so much from so many different people, and I've had the great fortune of working with tremendous people, being friendly with, having family who are tremendous examples in many different regards. So no one role model, no one mentor. I've taken things and learned things from many people. As to my career path, I never, I wasn't someone who had a singular goal in mind. I was the kid who wanted to be any number of things at any number of different times. Fell in love with sports at a very young age, but didn't see that as a path. It's something that worked out very well for me. It's something about which I'm very passionate, both in my role in the front office with the Raiders for those almost 30 years, in the work I do now with the big three. And of course, and I list this last because it's the biggest job that I have right now, my work with CBS Sports and CBS Sports Network.
I'm really curious with the analysis side and with football. I've heard you kind of call football like a game of chess and really similar to pieces moving and how you respond to them. What was the biggest thing or thing you watched or thing you read that really helped you understand the game of football? And like, because obviously, women don't get to play it often except for, kind of like Powder Puff League. It's harder to understand without physically going through it. But what do you think was most instrumental in understanding the game and being interested in how things work within football?
Well, more and more women are playing now, and it's exciting to see more and more women coaching now. But I fell in love with the game in junior high, and it struck me almost immediately that it was like a game of chess. It's a game of matchups. How do my defensive backs match up against your receivers? Can my pass protection take care of your pass rush? Can my pass rush get through your pass protection, get past your pass protection? How do my running backs fit against your linebackers and vice versa? It's a game of chess. Yes, it's a game with very, very strong, powerful, fast players, but it's a very cerebral game. It is a game of matchups. And that's one of the elements of the game with which I fell in love. To liken that chess game, to take it one step further, a game of chess with very fast, very powerful, very strong chess pieces. And I had the tremendous, tremendous fortune of discussing this game of matchups and learning about this game of matchups from primarily Al Davis. But I think back to the times where I would sit in rooms with Al and Bill Walsh and listen to the two of them talk about this game of matchups, or Al and any number of other tremendous football minds discuss this game of matchups. And I had the great, great fortune of learning so much from them.
So for you, what was it like how did you manage being a lawyer plus being in the sports field? What was the process like handling multiple things at once? How did you go about that business?
Well, I went to law school with the plan in mind that I was never going to practice law. In other words, I was one of those many people who goes to law school never intending to be a practicing lawyer. I went for the educational background. I went for the background and the value and how it would serve me in business. I went to law school again, expressly. And when I say expressly, I stated over and over again to people I know, look, I'm never going to practice law. I want this education because it will serve me well in business. And it did serve me well in business. And I did actually practice law with the Raiders for a bit of time, but I didn't go with the intent of being a practicing lawyer. And I swore to everyone, and I will never, ever, ever go in a courtroom. And then, of course, working with the Raiders, I did end up in the courtroom, but not as a practicing lawyer, as a witness in many pieces of litigation. Law school did give me a great background for business, and the education served me very, very, very well. And by the way, I have a lot of fun with it now on television, because when someone asks a question, I'll often offer a legal objection to a question I'm asked on TV. One of my CBS Sports teammates will ask me something and I'll say, objection, assumes a fact, not an evidence. And, I'm having fun with that, but I kind of think, hey, I did get something out of that whole evidence class.
I love that. I also just saw on your Twitter, you're talking about disclaimer. This is not an admission of or acknowledgement of any wrongdoing whatsoever. Talking about Jeff Schwartz, teams talking to agents before. Obviously they're allowed to. I love that. So
right, plead the fifth. We can plead the fifth on television. We can plead the fifth on Twitter. It doesn't have any value in doing it, but it's a lot of fun. And then I feel like I'm getting a little bit of more use out of that legal education.
There you go, getting the money's worth, all that, putting it in there. I'm curious with regards to Al Davis and how much of how unique he was in the NFL world, bringing in diversity, bringing in women into sports, and the idea of operating without regard to gender. How do you think we continue to have that mentality in other owners and other organizations? I think it's clearly becoming more of a thing, but with National Women in Sports Day, it's really cool to have that recognition, but how do we go about making it normal? I'm just curious what you kind of think is important.
Boy, so many thoughts on that. And you're so right to point out that Al was doing this, and he was doing this decades and decades and decades before it was even a topic. In other words, you just referenced the fact that this is now a discussion. When Al hired me, a lot of people that are listening to this conversation weren't even born when he did that. In other words, when I started with the Raiders, and it's horrifying for me to say that, and I say horrifying with a smile on my face, but many of your listeners weren't born when he hired me. I don't even want to know if you guys were born when he hired me. Uh-huh. But the fact is, that which we are discussing today wasn't even a topic of discussion back then. Chronologically, and I offer this chronologically, not in order of importance, because if it was in order of importance, I'd put myself last. But chronologically, he hired Tom Flores, and then he hired me, and then he advanced Art Shell from a position coach to the job of head coach. And this is an example of him hiring without regard to race, gender, or any other individuality, which has no bearing whatsoever on whether one can do a job. And when I'm asked, how do we get others to do what he did so many decades ago? My answer is, I don't know how we compel people to do the right thing. Yeah. People should be hired without regard to race or gender or any other individualities, which, as I said, have no bearing on whether one can do a job. And if there is such a thing as business Darwinism, businesses which don't do that should fail, because by definition, they are eliminating from consideration vast quantities of people who could help them be better.
Interesting. So I want to talk about your experience. Obviously, I know a couple of your coworkers at CBS. I had Keith Arizari on my show way back, and what's it like working with Keith, London Fletcher, Adam Shine, and all that crew on CBS? And London, actually, I think London replied to the tweet when I promoted your interview, and he replied on top of the tweet. But what was it like? What's it like working with them and working with the big three, with Ice Cube especially?
Well, as to CBS, the men you mentioned and so many more are magnificent teammates. Being on television is the scariest thing I've ever done. I am facing my biggest fear when those cameras go on, and every single person you mentioned, Keith, London, Adam, and I will add to that, there's just many more, Jonathan Jones, Jeff Radcliffe. They're teammates in the truest sense of the word. London is my linebacker. Yeah. London is a quintessential linebacker. He makes sure I am lined up in the right place. He makes sure I know my assignment, and he does everything he possibly can to keep me from stumbling or in any way failing. And that is the case with every single one of the people that we just named. I mentioned London in the sense of linebacker simply because he was a linebacker on the field. He is a linebacker in business. Sorry, I'm trying to make the construction noise go away a little bit. I hope that just worked. As to the big three, once again, my great fortune to work with people, Ice Cube, who you named, Jeff Kwatnitz, his co-founder, who don't care about one's race or gender. When I say they don't care, they don't consider those factors when hiring. We elevate, and I include Clyde Drexler in that as well. He's our commissioner. Yeah. When we elevated Clyde from coach to commissioner, we needed a new coach. And I was sitting with Cube and Jeff and Clyde, and I said, how about Nancy Lieberman? Yeah. Not one of those men referenced Nancy's gender. And you know what? In her first year as a coach with the big three, she won the championship, and she was named Coach of the Year by all her peers in the league, players, coaches, everyone. The next year we expanded. We needed another coach. We hired Lisa Leslie. So we are, and by the way, Lisa won the championship her first year and was named Coach of the Year her first year. My point being, we are a league with women and men as coaches.
I love that. And it's really cool to see the 3-on-3 game expand in general as well. Like getting to see that in the Olympics, hopefully this summer, 3-on-3 basketball should be fun.
Yeah, I was a little bit snarky when the Olympics announced that it was bringing 3-on-3 into the Olympics. I tweeted out, "You're welcome" from the big three. So maybe a little snarky on my part, but it is. I agree with you entirely. It's nice to see it expanding.
Yeah, it is such a unique game. I'm curious if you have seen the 30 for 30 Al Davis versus the NFL, and if you have your thoughts on the way it was written and kind of what they tried to convey and how much truth,
I did not watch it, and I do not plan to watch it, and that is not in any way to cast aspersions on it. I haven't seen it, so I have no aspersions to cast. The fact is, I spent almost 30 years working for Al, with Al, and I choose to remember him in my heart and in my mind's eye. He was a very, very important figure in my life and remains such. So I want to remember him as I remember him rather than through someone else's prism or perspective. And again, that is not in any way to cast aspersions at the show. It may be a terrific show. I don't know. But as I'm sure many may also, maybe they'll understand, but maybe they've also experienced when you have a relationship with someone, it's nice to remember that person through your own mind's eye and your heart rather than through someone else's perspective.
Absolutely. I might just have a quick follow-up on that then. Just where do you like where the Raiders are at right now and kind of where they're headed in that beautiful stadium?
Well, I am very, very excited for the fans to enjoy that stadium. Look, to not have fans in a stadium is, of course, a problem that, pales in comparison to people who are experiencing far worse problems throughout this pandemic, whether it's not having a place to live or not having ample food and things of that. I'm not equating those as problems, but to open a stadium for the Raiders, the Chargers, the Rams, and not be able to let fans in was disappointing to those fans. And of course, Raider fans are always going to be in my heart, and I shall always and forever want the very, very best in all regards for Raider fans. So I was disappointed for them that when the stadium opened, they couldn't be there. And I look forward to the day that they get to have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, so this is a two-part question real quick. Speaking of Raider fans, they gave you the name Princes of Darkness when you were with the Raiders. How did that come about? And then the next one here, what are your thoughts on the evolution of women in sports and the way it's growing in every sport? We're getting to see women coaching, women refs. And what's that like seeing that now?
Well, in order, I will answer them and tell you that I love my nickname. I shall always and forever cherish my nickname. I consider it the best nickname in the whole world. And I say that with a big smile on my face because everybody should love their nickname, or I hope they love their nicknames. I got the name, by the way, it was not intended as a compliment. Mike Silver wrote a piece for Sports Illustrated in which he quoted some anonymous sources as saying that behind my back, I was referred to by other team executives, league executives, as the Princess of Darkness. And again, it was not intended as a compliment, but Raider Nation loved it. I loved it. We took it. We grabbed it, and I will forever cherish that name. So while not intended as a compliment, we accepted it as one, we turned it into one, and I'm always going to cherish my nickname. As to the issue you raise about women in sports, look, every industry, sports or otherwise, should do as Al did all those decades before others were doing it, hire without regard to any individuality, whether race, gender, or otherwise, that, as I've said a few times, has no bearing on whether one can do a job. Has there been enough progress in that regard? No, but I'll put it in context for you. Over the course of my career, there has been progress. When I started my career with the Raiders all those years, all those decades ago, it wasn't women in the room. I went to my first league owners meeting and I was the only woman in the room. Now the room has quite a few tremendous, tremendous women in it. To name just a few, Hannah Gordon with the San Francisco 49ers, Jeannie Bonk with the Los Angeles Chargers, and I could go on and on. There are other terrific women throughout the league besides Hannah and Jeannie, or in addition to Hannah and Jeannie. So, until everyone is hiring without regard to race, gender, ethnicity, and other individualities, there won't have been enough progress. But has there been quite a bit of progress since I started my career? You bet.
And last question for me, it's a quick one. Just through your years with the Raiders, because it is such a cool demeanor that they hold and like ferocious and all that stuff, I love to know players that really stand out in your mind that were just a little bit of crazy, like on the field, like maybe top three, who they can be whoever they are off the field, but like can like turn it on and become like a machine, who might even like put fear in the eyes of you or other people that were just that stick out in your mind.
Oh, wow. I don't think I could limit it to three. The Raiders are known for having just tremendous, tremendous players. They're fierce and ferocious. They're terrific. I think I just can't limit it to three because I know I would get off this call and I would be kicking myself that I forgot to mention people. So I'll just leave it at that. I can't pick just three, and I'm not trying to be difficult. I just can't pick three.
I love it.
All right. So the last three things here, real quick. I'm sure you know this kid, Global Kid Media. I mean, he interacted with you on Twitter, I think, and he wants to know what do you think of kids now being sideline kid reporters?
I love it. I absolutely, positively love it. And I wish Global Kid Media and all the other kids that are doing things like that all the very, very best. I love it. I believe in his bio, Global Kid Media says he is a 14-year-old, and I think it's a he. I do believe, I looked into that, and I do believe it's a he. If I'm wrong, I apologize.
No, it's a
but,
he.
At 14 years old, I wasn't even doing my homework. So when I see, on his bio, it says president of a media company, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, at 14, I was trying to get to school on time. So I didn't get, held after class to sit in detention. I love it. I love what CBS Sports did with Nickelodeon to grow the game in that regard with kid input and slime. I love it. I think it's terrific.
And the last two things here, we're part of the Hugh Jackson Foundation. Obviously, former NFL coach. He's trying to get back into coaching, but we're ambassadors for his foundation. We're trying to help prevent human trafficking and making sure the community is safe. So I'll send you their page so you can check out their foundation, Hugh Jackson Foundation. And we're grateful to be part of it as ambassadors and trying to help them prevent human trafficking. And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers right now?
Well, I'm going to say something first quickly about Hugh Jackson and his foundation. I am very, very well aware of the foundation. I'm very familiar with it. I love Hugh. I love the work his foundation does. I've been a fan and a supporter of it since I learned of it a number of years ago. And I think it's terrific that you guys are supporting it as well. They are doing very, very important work. And I shall always root and cheer for Hugh, for his success, for his family, for his success, for his happiness, and that for his family as well. And I do support his foundation. And of course, to everyone who is doing all that they can do to help everyone throughout this moment in time, this pandemic, frontline workers, nurses, doctors, everyone who's helping on the front lines. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, well said. And there it is. That wraps up episode 717 with the inspiring, hardworking, amazing Amy Trask. She's well known in the sports industry, a lawyer, American sports executive, author, and former CEO of the Raiders. Thank you for joining us today. This is truly an honor. You're really amazing, strong woman, inspiring, and keep up the great work. And I love what you do. And obviously, we're going to stay connected on Twitter, and you and your family stay safe.
Thank you very much. And thank you guys for having me. It was an absolute pleasure to join you. And I'm glad we were finally able to work it out so we could do this.
Yeah, and actually, big shout out to Bailey, your PR person. She is amazing to work with.
Well, not just mine. She does this for everyone at CBS Sports. So yes, big shout out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.